Yeah, Nazanin Boniadi, how would you like to comment this? Because also, what way can, external pressure towards the regime, what can it change?
This is extremely important, what Mrs. Ebadi says, and we have a unique and time-bound opportunity at the moment to have gender apartheid recognized and defined under international law, because there is a treaty, the Crimes Against Humanity Treaty, that is currently being negotiated globally. And we need UN member states, we need the international community to do exactly what Mrs. Ebadi says, and call for the recognition of gender apartheid under international law. Why? Because the oppression and segregation of women is a pillar of this regime. If that pillar crumbles, the regime will crumble. When we say this is a women-led revolution, when we say it's a feminist revolution, this is what we mean. Iranian women have managed to galvanize Iranian society at large to understand the intersectionality of women's rights and every other human right. Ethnic minority rights, religious minority rights, LGBTQ rights, political right to dissent, freedom of expression. Every single one of these rights is inextricably bound to women's rights. Because as Marjan said, women's rights are human rights. And I want to go back to 79 for a second. When the compulsory hijab was imposed, there were women who came out in protest, who risked their violence and lashes and imprisonment and harassment, and they came out to protest because they understood early on, as Mrs. Ebadi did, that when you do that to women, everything else in the society will go downhill. There were women who, because they themselves wore the veil, they thought, well, what's the big deal? So what? It's a law. And they just went along with their lives and they didn't protest. And then we have a third segment of society. Women who were willing to sacrifice women's rights at the altar of anti-imperialism. And I ask you, and I'm calling on the Iranian people because they know this all too well, that they will never sacrifice women's rights at any altar, no matter what that altar is. Never sacrifice human rights, dignity, women's rights at any altar, no matter what gain you think you're attaining. Because if women's rights don't exist, human rights cannot exist. And that's what Iran is faced with right now.
Bravo.